and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the Trickery Domain Cleric. Now the Trickery Domain is one that's widely hated on the internet, and I'm sure if any of you played with other people, you've probably had somebody at your table who complained that it was the worst of the Cleric different domains. I actually disagree. I wouldn't say it's among the best, but I would rate it in probably the top half. I think it's pretty strong overall. It has a few abilities that are pretty weak and very underwhelming, and we'll talk about that. We'll look at a lot of the complaints that people have had online, because some of those do have a lot of validity to them. But we'll also look at why I think it's actually pretty good, and why so many people seem to underrate it. So to start with, let's take a look. I'm just going to look at it from the book. Sorry if that's a little boring, but there's a lot of stuff I want to go over, and I want to make sure that I get it right. So when you first take Cleric Domain, you get choose yours at level 1, you're going to get Blessing of the Trickster, and it's going to give you the ability to use your action to touch a willing creature other than yourself and give it advantage on dexterity stealth checks. It lasts 1 hour or until you use the feature again. I actually think this ability is pretty good. A lot of people complain you can't use it on yourself, but if you look at, like, say, the War Cleric, which I did a video on before, we had like a roundtable discussion with me and some friends, played the class. The War Cleric isn't necessarily great at melee. Like, they're not bad, but if you think you're going to be like a fighter or a paladin or a barbarian, you're going to be very disappointed. More, it's there to support and help those characters to be even better. You have things like Crusader's Mantle. You're kind of a support character, but from the front ranks. The Trickery Domain Cleric isn't the stealthy, sneaky guy. You're just not. But you're there to help support the party and to allow other people to be stealthier and sneakier. And it's not the rogue that really needs this. The rogue's going to have expertise. He's going to have reliable talent at higher levels, He's probably pumping up his dex already, and he's going to be able to, have 30 plus on a lot of stealth rolls as he gets to higher levels and has higher level proficiencies. And that's the truth. It's very common for rogues to have 30 plus roll on a stealth check. What you're there for is to help that big lumbering plate wearing paladin or warrior, or fighter I should say, to be able to get past whatever it is. The rogue's already going to be fine. You're probably going to be fine, because if you made a Trickery Domain Cleric, you probably want to be at least a little sneaky. You've got things that you can cast like guidance to help somebody on a stealth roll. But the problem is there's always in almost every party 1 or 2 people who are wearing heavy plate or heavy armor in general, really, but usually plate, and now they have disadvantage on their stealth roll. And they probably dumped dexterity because they knew they were going to be wearing like heavy armor and weren't going to get a dex bonus anyway, so why not use dex as your dump stat? Those guys are never going to be able to sneak past whatever you're trying to sneak through, and they're going to give your party away. But now you can cancel out their disadvantage, and between something like this ability and guidance, they actually have a reasonable chance of being able to make a stealth roll. So it is fairly situational. If you have a party where your tank is a barbarian and then everybody else are all clothies and light armor wearers, this ability is not going to see a ton of use. It's not going to be super strong. But if you're trying to be sneaky and you've got a couple guys in plate mail, or at least one guy in plate mail, this ability can be a godsend. That wasn't meant to be a pun, sorry. It was not. At level 2, Channel Divinity, Invoke Duplicity. A lot of people hate this ability. It isn't great, I gotta be honest. You can use your Channel Divinity to create an illusionary duplicate of yourself. As an action, you create a perfect illusion that lasts 1 minute or until you lose your concentration. So it takes your concentration, and it takes an action, and it takes your Channel Divinity. The illusion appears within 30 feet of you. As a bonus action on your turn, you can move the illusion up to 30 feet away, but it must remain within 120 feet. For the duration, you can cast spells as though you were in the illusion space, but you must use your own senses. So in other words, you can't cast him to use him to scout around a corner, because he can't actually see. You still have to be able to see what's around that corner. You can't just use him to scout or anything like that. Additionally, if both you and your illusion are within 5 feet of a creature that can see the illusion, you have advantage on attack rolls against that creature, given how distracting the illusion is. So, I'm not going to say it's all bad. There are circumstances where you could use it to give yourself advantage. That's not the worst thing ever, of course. Being able to deliver touch spells through your illusion, where you're safely 30 or 60 or 120 feet away, can be very good as well. So there are moments for this ability to shine, but it is a pretty high cost. Like I said, you're using your action, you're using a bonus action to move the thing, you're using your concentration, and you're using one of your channel divinities. That's a really high cost for something that's kind of mediocre, you know? I don't think it's a very great ability, but that's okay. That's one that I agree with people on the internet. Channel Divinity, Cloak of Shadows. You get this at level 6. So you can use an action to become invisible until the end of your next turn. You become visible if you attack or cast a spell. Again, this ability isn't really great, because if you're in combat, your next turn is 6 seconds away. I do think there's chances, like let's say you want to sneak past something and you're not in combat, in which case the turn's going to be like a full minute, then there's good opportunity to use it there. Maybe you're running from a bunch of city guards and you want to run around the corner and then use your ability to turn invisible. If I was a dungeon master, I would allow that to work, and I wouldn't really worry too much about whether or not it's 6 seconds or whether it's a minute or whatever, right? I'd just say, you know, because it is kind of a limited ability, I'm not afraid of people trying to really use it much. I mean, they can't attack, they can't cast spells without becoming visible again. Again, it's sort of situational. There are chances that you might want to use it, and it may be very beneficial, but overall, again, I wouldn't say it's a great ability. Divine Strike at level 8, common to half the clerics. At level 8, you usually get bonus damage to your cantrips, or you're going to get bonus damage to your melee attacks. I prefer the cantrips overall, to be honest, but Trickery, you're going to get bonus to your melee. So you're going to get an extra d8 damage. It's going to go to 2d8 extra damage at level 14. Unfortunately, that damage is poison, and this is something that people have pointed out a lot. Poison is the most commonly resisted damage type in the game, and it's one of the highest immunes. It might even be the highest immune type as well. Pretty much all your elementals, all your undead, most demons and devils and other fiends, celestials, some fae are even immune to poison. Like it's not great, but I kind of don't feel like adding bonus damage to your melee attack on a cleric is ever really a great ability. And I know that might be kind of controversial to say. I know there's war clerics are like, yeah, but you know, I took Booming Blade with the with multi-classing or with a feat, and then I get my Booming Blade damage, and then I get my 2d8 because I'm level 17 or whatever, you know, on top. And like, don't get me wrong, you can build around it and make a fairly decent, competent melee cleric. You can. I'm just saying that without taking other things to enhance the ability, an extra 1 or 2d8 isn't that great, because your cantrip would have scaled with that much damage anyways. Like a Toll the Dead by the time you're 14 is going to be doing 3d12 damage. You know, that's not too bad. It's certainly going to be comparable with this, and you're not going to have to worry about it being poison. So while I do think that there's a lot of truth to the idea that poison is the worst and they shouldn't have given him poison, it honestly, I don't think it's a great ability to begin with. And I remember I had a life cleric, and I pretty much just cast Sacred Flame on her most of the time. Granted, it was an NPC cleric, but still, you know, I was running her a lot. But I just had her cast Sacred Flame a lot, and she gets bonus damage to her melee strikes. But why do I want my life cleric up in the front lines meleeing stuff and then getting hit? You know, I'm trying to concentrate on spells. I got more important things to do. Cast my good spells and then just, you know, blap away the cantrip while I'm, you know, not having to worry about it. So, I mean, again, I don't think it's great, but it's not a great ability in general. At level 17, your capstone, you're going to get the ability to create up to 4 duplicates of yourself instead of 1 when you use the Invoke Duplicity. As a bonus action, you can move any number of them up to 30 feet to a maximum of 120 feet. Again, not particularly great. It's got a lot of restrictions that your level 2 ability had, and, you know, I don't know that having 4 duplicates of myself is necessarily that much stronger than having 1. So, if you only look at the Trickery Domain Cleric's abilities, you've got Blessing of the Trickster, you can give somebody advantage on a stealth roll. I consider that to be very good. You've got Invoke Duplicity, which I consider to be pretty weak. You've got Cloak of Shadows, which is average at best, maybe even slightly below average. You've got Divine Strike, which is, again, okay, but nothing strong. And then you've got Invoke Duplicity, which, again, is rather underwhelming. So it's easy to see why people look at that and think, well, this domain is terrible. Because it does have a lot of pretty weak and underwhelming abilities. And the only one that I think is really strong, you get at level 1. So, it's all downhill from there, essentially. So why do I actually think the domain is pretty good then? And that is pretty easy to answer. It is the domain spell list. As you probably know, all clerics get certain spells from their domain that are added to their spell list and count as always prepared and always known. And so, you can just cast them using your spell slots whenever you want. The Trickery Domain spell list is probably the best domain spell list of any cleric domain. It is so good. So at first level, you're going to have Charm Person and Disguise Self, both okay for first level spells. Third level though, you're going to get Mirror Image, one of the best defensive spells in the game and does not require concentration. And you're going to get Pass Without Trace. Pass Without Trace is one of the best, like when it comes to stealth type stuff for a group, there's nothing better than Pass Without Trace. It's an amazing spell. I've been in parties where we ambushed like an ancient rock once, right, the giant bird thing, and me with my champion fighter in full plate armor carrying like a half a dozen weapons on me was able to sneak up on the rock thanks to Pass Without Trace, and our party ambushed this thing and killed it in less than one round of combat. It never even got a chance to act. We just surprised it. Its initiative was kind of on the lower side, and we just crushed the thing. It was like 300 damage we did without it even having a chance to respond. In another game, I think with the same characters though, we managed to use Pass Without Trace and ambush a dragon and killed the dragon. Again, in one round of combat, although I did the action surge that time. That was crucial. But the point is, it is so good. Whether you're just trying to sneak, whether you're trying to ambush stuff, whatever. Like a plus 10 to your roll, and then you could use that and still be able to, give somebody advantage on their stealth rolls. So if you still have that heavy armor wearing guy, you can cancel the disadvantage, you can use Pass Without Trace, and he's just going to be like a ninja. Your whole party will be a bunch of ninjas. It's an amazing spell. At 5th level, you're going to get Blink, another strong defensive spell, and Dispel Magic. Dispel Magic's already on your spell list, but, now you don't have to worry about preparing it and taking it. Dispel Magic's one of those things that you could go 5 games in a row and never use it, and then feel like, why is this on my prepared list? And then when you do need it, you're like, why didn't I have this prepared? This would have been a complete game changer. It just depends what stuff you're fighting and whether or not they're using a lot of spells and buffs and whatnot. So having it on my always prepared list, I think is good. That's one thing I like about Life Clerics. I don't have to prepare all my healing spells. They're just automatically there and they're automatically prepared. So it'll freeze me to go kind of deeper into the Cleric spell list and take things that maybe I wouldn't have always taken, but which I still really like. 7th level, you're going to get access to Dimension Door and Polymorph. 2 of the best 4th level spells the wizards even have. Dimension Door gives you something that clerics are really sorely lacking in, and that is mobility spells. And now you've got one of the best ones there is. Polymorph, one of the most versatile and best spells at 4th level in the entire game, in my opinion. You can use it to save a comrade who's about to go down. Instead of healing the guy, you can polymorph him and turn him into like a giant ape or a tyrannosaurus or whatever else. And now he's got all those temporary hit points, and he's not gonna, you could give him 120 temporary hit points instead of healing him for 20 hit points, which is gonna be way more effective and prevent him from going down. You can use it to crowd control enemies. It's got so many uses. It's just an amazing spell, and now you've got access to it. And in my opinion, the spell list of the Trickery Domain Cleric is what really makes the domain actually really, really strong. At 9th level, your 5th level spells for your domain, you're going to get Dominate Person, pretty good, and Modify Memory. Um, Modify memory can be really, really fun to use and has a ton of role playing potential. It's not necessarily a combat ability, but it's an ability that I really like, especially if you're going to be dealing with like merchants or nobles or somebody that you might want to come back to later. You can you can come up with some crazy shenanigans that you can pull with that spell. Um, so that's the domain spell list. Now, I wanted to just kind of talk about the idea of being a Trickery Cleric in general, because I think that mischievous kind of, I'm with the party, but I'm kind of a prankster as well, can be a lot of fun to play, at least for you. It might not be fun for your teammates, depending on how you do it, but those kind of characters have a lot of roleplay potential. And so often I see people who say things like, I thought Trickery Domain looked really cool, but everybody says it's terrible, so I decided to make a War Cleric instead. And I'm not trying to bash War Clerics. I played a War Cleric. I love War Clerics. War Clerics can be a lot of fun too. In fact, clerics in general are just a lot of fun. My point is, though, that if all you're looking at is the class features and abilities, it can seem pretty weak. But when you start looking at the spell list, you start realizing that this class actually has a lot going for it, especially, like I said, in that role of buffing and supporting your allies and helping them to be stealthy. It's not just Blessing of the Trickster. You've got, like I said, Pass Without Trace. You can use Guidance to give people an extra D4 on stuff. I mean, all clerics could do that, but you're even better with it, because now you can start stacking some of these other types of things, give somebody advantage and an extra D4, whatever. And I think that there's so much strength there that you can actually play, instead of just having to fight your way through everything. It opens up the possibility of being a sneaky, stealthy party, which a lot of groups just don't have that option, because somebody always decides to wear full plate mail armor, and that person is usually me. But that's not always an option. Now it is, just because you have a Trickery Domain Cleric. My friend Brendan actually talked about running a game where the entire party were members of a Thieves Guild. And so we were all thinking about making rogues. The game never happened, so we never actually made the characters. But I remember asking at one point if I could make my character a Trickery Domain Cleric and still be a member of the Thieves Guild. And he said that was fine. So I started thinking a lot about it and things I wanted to do with it. And I just think there's a ton of roleplay potential there. I think that it could be a really fun character to play. I haven't had a chance to do it myself yet. But like I said, I really like the spell list. And I think combined with things, like there's no reason you still couldn't be a melee cleric if you really wanted to, even as Trickery Domain. Yeah, okay, you don't have access to heavy armor like Life and War and Tempest clerics do. That does kind of suck. But you're probably trying to be kind of stealthy and sneaky anyways, If you wanted to make a melee cleric, Trickery wouldn't have been my first option anyways, I'm trying to probably be kind of sneaky or mischievous or duplicitous or whatever, So take things that are going to go along with that. You could take, say, the criminal or the street urchin backgrounds, and you'll be proficient with thieves' tools. And I'm not saying you're going to be better than a rogue will be, but, between having like a decent dex bonus and giving yourself advantage with guidance, or not advantage, sorry, the extra D4 from guidance and proficiency, you could be a substitute rogue in a pinch. You're never going to be as good, like I said. You're not going to have expertise, but you can get the job done. And, you can even be a decent stealthy scout guy if you need to be. And I think that you could start using your image for some really interesting things too. Like if you want to use it to distract people, like you just put your image up, draw the guard's attention, and the party sneaks by the other direction. There's a lot of potential for all sorts of shenanigans you can get to with a perfect duplicate of yourself that you can, cast and move and whatnot. So is it necessarily great in combat? It can be okay. You can give yourself advantage. But I think there's a lot of other uses outside of combat, and especially in like the exploration and roleplay type pillars of the game. I think that's where Trickery Domain Cleric really starts to shine. I'm not going to go over like a lot of the feats and races the way I usually do. I will mention though that you might want to consider something like Dungeon Delver potentially even on a class like this. I don't think it's a great feat in general, But if you really wanted to, it could be worth the investment if that sort of fits what you want to roleplay. I think it could be kind of interesting. Um, you might want to consider something like Warcaster, of course, because you're a cleric. But I think one thing about your ability to invoke duplicity is that you can be casting a lot of those range or a lot of those touch spells from range, and so it kind of frees you up to not have to take a lot of those type of feats, which I think is a good thing. It gives you a lot more options of how you want to build your character without feeling like, oh, I have to take, you know, Resilient Con or Warcaster because I'm playing a character who has to be able to concentrate on spells and I don't want to lose concentration. You know, there's other ways to get around that sometimes. So those are my thoughts on the Trickery Domain Cleric. This video is a little shorter than usual. I don't think that it's the strongest cleric class in the game, like I said, but it's far from being the worst. And I think a lot of people who are only looking at combat as being the only thing that matters, they weren't going to be happy with this subclass anyways. You know, like you should probably be playing a barbarian or a fighter or a paladin or somebody who does truckloads of damage if that's what you're looking for. Don't try to take a support class and turn it into that, you know? And if you wanted to be the sneaky stealth guy and still have some spells, that's what the Arcane Trickster is for. You are a cleric, you are there to help support and buff and enable your party members to do what they need to do even better. And in that role, I think the Trickery Domain Cleric is exceptionally good at it, especially because of their domain spells and their ability to, you know, negate disadvantage from some guys, give advantage to others, and I think that they're pretty strong overall in the niche of which they're supposed to fit. So those are my thoughts on the class. Feel free to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, all that jazz, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.